welcome to another edition of the Comic Anthologist. And if you're tuning in for the first time, please hit that subscribe button. Now, I'm glad that we're back.
Yeah, because I want to apologize for an extra long delay due to unforeseen technical difficulties.
You ain't never lied about that.
Tell
That's
me
all
about
I have to say. You ain't
Yeah,
never lied about
we're
that.
not even going to go there with that.
No, we won't even go there. We're just
No,
glad to
hell
be
no.
back and getting everything back up to snuff like we were supposed to. Now today, in honor of Black History Month, we are going to highlight the company called Milestone Media. And Milestone Media was an imprint that was used basically to creators that felt that they were unrepresented in the comic industry at that time.
Exactly.
And the great experiment lasted from 1993 to 1997. And it was under the brainchild of Dennis Cowan, Dwayne McDuffie, Michael Dingle, and Mark Davis. And now, when they created this, they decided to go ahead and create several titles, which was under the DC Comics imprint. Now, DC editorial did not have anything to do, to a degree, with the editorial decisions that they made with some of the stories.
Right.
And that included some of the stories, or rather some of the comic book characters' titles, which was called Hardware.
Static, which eventually became Static Shock at some point later on down
Well,
the line.
Hardware? No.
Hardware is the equivalent of Iron Man.
Iron Man, yes. Then it was Static, just like he said, but Static became Static Shock down the road. And that was the only breakout character that crossed over into the medium of the comics
And
animation. And eventually he made an appearance in Injustice 2 with the superhero fighting video game.
Oh, there you go.
And then there was Icon, which was the black equivalent to Superman at the time.
And his character was basically an alien rocketed to Earth during slavery times.
Yeah, and the funny thing about this version of this alien was that the ship that he was on literally there was some kind of event going on inside the ship, but there was a technical difficulty. It exploded. He got on a life pod, ended up crashing to Earth, but the life pod basically changed his body and his DNA to match what was going on at that time.
At that time, and the slave couple picked him up. And
During the late 1700s, early 1800s, during the time of the slavery era in the United States of America, which is still a dark part of history. But getting back to the point, that was Icon, and then they had the Blood Syndicate, and then there was Zombie, which with an X, X-O-M-B-I, and then there was Y-Sun, the White Wolf, which was a limited series.
Right.
And then there was Cobalt. And then the last two series that they did for the Milestone imprint, or rather the Milestone Media imprint, was called Heroes. And that was basically a crossover event for all the heroes, basically almost like a finale of sorts, but that wasn't the finale. Now, when they created these characters, like I said, DC Comics felt like, okay, you guys can have carte blanche to do whatever you want.
Right,
They
exactly.
came to a certain degree that they had it, but there was one controversial issue that DC had an issue with in terms of...
Which was?
On the cover of Static Shock, it was basically him... It was basically he was about to lose his virginity. So the creators flat out said that DC probably just had an issue with them because it was black sexuality.
Right.
And because he had unopened condoms in the bed next to him with his girlfriend inside the story, and basically they were approaching it as a responsible way. But the DC brass, however, felt differently, like, no, we can't publish this. This is no.
Which to me was ridiculous.
Of course it was. But like I said, the books lasted for those 4 years, and it lasted for a pretty long time, and it eventually crossed over with the mainstream DC universe.
Yeah, because there was a storyline that was called Worlds Collide.
Yes.
And it was in the pages of Superman and Action Comics, and the Milestone books that the characters finally met. Like Icon met Superman, Static met other characters.
And then Hardware met Steel.
Steel, exactly. So yeah, it was a pretty interesting crossover back in the day.
Now, what caused all of the superheroes in this particular Dakotaverse, because it took place in the fictional city of Dakota, was basically the police decided to use experimental tear gas. The mayor had basically given the okay for the police to go ahead and try to shut down the gangs when they basically had a truce going on that night.
Right.
And they shot the experimental tear gas into the gangs. And as a direct result, they were called Bang Babies.
And a lot of the gangsters that got caught up in that experimental tear gas A good chunk of them died, and the ones who survived ultimately became the Blood Syndicate, and as so it happened, fate would have it that the other kid that would become static, Virgil will become static. He happened to be caught in that area at the wrong place.
And he's at the wrong place at the wrong time. Ended up gaining the powers of electricity and flight.
Well, I guess the right time because he became a superhero.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was basically the start of the entire Dakotaverse superhero line. Now, like I said, it lasted for 4 years.
Right.
And during that time, they made a lot of headway. But the main breakout character from that Dakotaverse was Static.
Yeah, because his character became popular on a Saturday morning children's cartoon. Again, and then just like you mentioned earlier, he popped up in a video game, Injustice 2.
Yes, he did. And he also popped up in certain parts of the media. Now they're all incorporated into the DC universe.
Right.
Which is what I'm about to get to in just a second, is that in 2008, it was Dan DiDio's decision to go ahead and incorporate the rest of the Dakota characters from that universe into the DC mainstream universe, and eventually that Earth was nicknamed Earth M in a parallel world after the whole crisis thing went down. We're not talking about the Crisis on Infinite Earths. That's a totally different story altogether.
Right.
But this is one of those things where they classified it as Earth M,
right,
which was basically Earth Milestone.
Right.
And on top of that, in 2010, they had released a finale of sorts, which was Milestone Forever.
Right.
Which wrapped up the storylines of practically every character that was caught up in that Dakotaverse. And as a direct result, they figured, okay, let's wrap this up since we can't do anything with it. And like I said, the Static Shock character had so much crossover appeal. That's why Milestone imprint became Milestone Media as a direct result of that, because he was breaking out and coming out in so many other different various
ways. The latest time I've seen Static Shock, though, was in in season 3 of Young Justice.
Oh, he also popped up in next. That was another point I was going to get at. Thank you. He popped up in Young Justice. And Icon actually popped up in the Justice League Unlimited cartoon series back in the day as well. And it was that time where you saw basically all the superheroes that were being represented during the last final parts of the Justice League cartoon series. Right. Because they wanted to make sure they included everybody in there. But Young Justice was the biggest one where they had him in. And also in the pages of, not the pages, but the episode of Young Justice, not Young Justice, what was that? Oh, Justice League Unlimited. Where, remember they did that time travel episode where it was Batman, Green Lantern, and...
yeah, I know which one you're talking about, right.
Basically, they had an older version of
Static Shock.
Static Shock. He was in his 60s, basically working with the Justice League Unlimited at that time.
Right.
Working with Batman Beyond, Barda, against a criminal who was basically going around changing time for his own...
nefarious purposes.
Exactly. So, what was your take on the whole Milestone universe?
I enjoyed it, basically, because I liked... And me being a fan of Iron Man, I was very curious about hardware.
Right.
And I collected that whole run from beginning to end because I collected hardware and I collected Static.
Okay.
And both of those were like my favorites.
Well, Static, you can't find anywhere. I mean, even if you try to go back and try to get the back issues, you can't even find it.
Well, that's why I'm glad I got the regular back issues.
Yeah, because it was the first appearance of that kind of breakout character. Yeah, right. You're not going to find him anywhere else out there.
Right.
And also, too, my favorite was Icon.
And I have to give honorable mention to Blood Syndicate.
Yes.
Because one of the main villains in there that was one of the gang leaders in that book was Holocaust. The one that manipulated fire and was doing this thing. Yeah, so he was like one of my favorite villains as far as I'm concerned. So I kind of felt like, though, in the cartoon series, the Static Shock series, they watered his character down with... a fire character, but it was watered down.
But of course, they're not going to sit up there and do the original version.
Look, man, I don't like my filth too clean.
Oh, I get that, but at the same time, it's one of those things that they just had to do that so that way it had the crossover appeal.
Right.
And they had to have that villain that had that crossover appeal. But
yeah, I get it.
That ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, exactly. So.
But like I said, in 2017, let's just say Dwayne McDuffie, one of the co-founders of Milestone Media, he had passed away back in February of 2011. And I had the honor of getting a chance to see one of his last works in Beverly Hills.
Are you talking about when you went to that screening?
The Paley Pavilion, yes. When I went to the screening to go see Superman.
All-Star Superman.
Yes, I went to go see All-Star Superman. And he was basically doing a Q&A with the audience or whatnot. And literally, I should have gone down there to see him that last time, because he was just putting out questions to everybody. Because 2 days later after that screening, he had passed away from complications from his surgery from having open heart surgery to correct a valve or whatnot. And at that time, he was 49 years old.
Oh, wow.
So,
yeah.
And like I said, there's another thing that went on. Now his widow is trying to sue DC Comics and Reginald Hudlin and the other co-founders because she felt like she got chopped out of the proceeds and the monies and the creative aspect, because she works in the comic book industry too. Mm-hmm. So, but she felt like she got slighted, and that's an ongoing thing that right now I can't even go there.
Yeah.
But it's still going on to this very day. But in any case, Reginald Hudlin and the last three creators were basically trying to revive the property,
right?
So that way they could relaunch those books. But so far, nothing has kind of happened of that, and that was back in 2017. So it's been almost 3 years. But that remains to be seen. But we will do that on another broadcast if it ever comes to pass.
Right.
In any case, this is the Comic Anthologist. Thank you for tuning in, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so. And
if you have any questions about what we talked about, or correct what we've talked about, if you've had better information, let us know.
Please let us know, because I'll be more than happy to sit up there and chop talk with anyone or answer anyone who have those kind of questions. Until then, take it easy and peace.